How do you make Peter Griffin look cool? Give him a Glock, a tash, and a pair of glasses he can barely see out of, and ladies and gentlemen, you've got yourself Hitman, codename Egg McMuffin. I feel as if stories like this will become more commonplace in the shonen world. Stories that have a certain level of charisma, not just in their characters but in their writing. I think the general shonen boy goes on an adventure shtick has taken a backseat in recent years. It just doesn't hit different enough when we have things like One Piece serenading our eyes with a story that can only be described as a stupendous confectionery. Now we need a manga to have a certain type of individuality that allows us the readers to feel as if it's authentic, like the author is actually trying to give us something they care about. And to be honest, I don't think it's our fault. We've been pampered with far too much good shit. We've forgotten the struggle and how back then we would pray for times like this. But it's things like Sakamoto Days that keeps the manga community well fed. I don't know how Shonen Jump keeps these mangas coming, but their discerning eye for taste is impeccable. I mean, how on God's green earth is everything that's allowed in that magazine so damn good? Speaking of damn good, meet our round protagonist, Mr. Sakamoto, a humble store owner living out his life with his wife and his daughter. After learning that he was an ex-hitman employed by the organization that manages hitmen, the JAA, we also learned Mr. Sakamoto was a part of a special unit called the Order, comprised of the JAA's elite members, and it becomes extremely clear that he was a man to be feared. Sakamoto gave up his hitman life because he fell in love, and he decides to open up a shop with his wife and his daughter where he can hopefully live out a normal, peaceful life. But unfortunately, his past catches up to him, and a bounty is put on his head for a considerable amount of money. I mean, it's the type of money I'd shoot him for. You see, the obvious outcome to his previous line of work is you just can't stop being a hitman. It's a way of life with no exit opportunities. You don't get a pension plan or a 401k. You only get back. You're either a hitman or the target, but you can't be neither. Before even reading the manga, the first image I saw was a chubby man in an apron pointing a gun toward my screen, and immediately I assumed this was going to be another way of the house husband kind of manga. You know, like harmless jokes with dangerous situations that aren't actually dangerous but are created purely for entertainment. That's what I assumed I was walking into, and it's a fair assumption. I mean, look at him. I mean, he blocks a bullet with a cough drop in the first chapter. I'd like to know in what state must the world be in for that to be a plausible situation. The manga's insanely deceptive because it sets up these comedy slice of life tropes that you somewhat expect to continue. However, what tips you off to the impending tone switch is the simple fact that very early on, the manga doesn't shy away from showing you decapitated heads and blood, and it's at this point you can tell this manga may not be the comedy experience it initially set out before you. I mean, on what planet do you take an alternate version of Peter Griffin seriously? It just doesn't happen. As you move through the story, you are introduced to some new characters, but then comes that all-powerful tone shift. We are introduced to a man named X, who later is given the name Slur, and is the main antagonist of this story. Upon being introduced to this sick son of a bitch, we get a sense for some parts of his personality. He views his ideals and criminal acts as some sort of art that's masterfully crafted by him. He's a genuine danger and truly haunting as he shows the length he's willing to go to achieve his goals and align with like-minded individuals who are simply lunatics, which is great for us because this makes for a far more interesting cast of characters and very unpredictable moments. And it's this sudden cross between comedy and the tone of death that sets this manga apart from a lot of the competition. It doesn't give you a consistent theme to latch onto. It can easily change tones a couple of panels later. The world can be bleak and lighthearted or comedic all in the same chapter, and you never really know what Sakamoto's going to pull out next. In one panel he could be fighting with a frying pan, and in the next he could be using a traffic sign to stop a bus. And what makes this manga great is that he's not the only wildcard on the roster. We have Shin, an ex-hitman that used to work with Sakamoto but was later asked to kill him, and now he's a full-time employee at Mr. Sakamoto's shop. Oh, and he has clairvoyance abilities, you know, reading minds, you know the deal. Next we have Lou, the daughter of a triad family that can only fight to her best capabilities when she's shit-faced. We have Mashimo, an ex-hitman who can't do anything else but use a sniper. And then there's Nagamo, a current member of the Order and Sakamoto's old colleague. Aside from being a masterful hitman, he also has the ability to change skins. Like literally he can disguise himself as other people, and it's never even explained how this is a thing. It just is. These aren't even all the characters, and we already have a clairvoyant, a drunken fighter, and a bootleg Deadshot. And it doesn't just stop here. There are many characters you meet that are just insane and add even more unpredictability to the story. For example, every now and again you'll get a wandering old man just show up to cut shit in half, and what makes it worse, his eyes are closed. I don't know if this means he's asleep or it's a condition, I don't know, it's never said. The manga clearly chooses when to add these sporadic moments of insanity, and that's what shocks you back into the driver's seat to tell you wake up, you've got a chapter to finish. The characters make this manga what it is. Drop any of them in any world and it will be an insanely entertaining experience. They are absolute nutcases, and they make up for the manga's lack of world building, but I never really took that as a bad thing. The world should be blank so it can use the characters to make a mess. I think strenuous world building in this case would do more harm than good, because it could end up obscuring some parts of the manga that would seem less prominent with a super busy world. But this veil of slapstick humor and light-hearted banter might only be there to keep your attention elsewhere while the looming danger of Slur continues to grow, and his influence continues to disrupt the peace of Sakamoto's life. Slur's goal seems clear and ironclad. He wants to destroy the infrastructure of hitmen that has been set up by the JAA. His motivations for this are unclear and somewhat vague. It could just be a nobody attacking a corporation that left him in the dust, or Slur could be trying to create a new world order with him as the figurehead. But one thing's for certain, Taro Sakamoto is involved to some capacity, and may even be the whole reason this is happening. And this leads us to meeting some very dangerous characters that genuinely threaten the lives of Sakamoto and his family, which of course then leads to fighting. The fights in this manga are clear and dynamic. There's powers, cool flips, guns, weapons and abilities, and there's even a case of wireless VR combat. I mean, who would have thought you could use an Oculus to play Street Fighter Real Life Edition? The fights add a certain validity to the deathiness tone that's exuded by these chapters. There's blood everywhere, limbs are severed and bodies get sliced like bamboo, and at the center of it all is a man who thinks an apron is a fashion choice. I mean, he just wears it out sometimes, it's strange. Taro Sakamoto himself doesn't talk much, and when he does, it's usually for something important. He doesn't intrinsically have any goals as a character, but there is a sort of hero's journey built into the plot. As much as the supporting characters make this manga even greater, Sakamoto easily clutches the throne as the funniest and by far the coolest character in the whole manga. Sakamoto adds stakes to the manga, and he adds a great amount of humor as well. I'm kinda happy we get a middle-aged man as a main character instead of a 13-year-old that could level buildings. Sakamoto being who he is affects everything from his motivations to his demeanor and the way he interacts with the characters. We are watching a father, a husband and a mentor in this manga, instead of a kid who's just come out of the womb wanting to experience life. I think having an older main character allows for some very interesting interactions and new perspectives when dealing with scenarios that could seem similar to what we've seen before. The manga is serious and deliberate, but also entertaining and funny at the same time. It's hard to figure out how this manga keeps you invested in the overarching plot and outcome, but can still manage to make you laugh out loud with its cast of likable and unique characters. The manga is unseriously serious, and this would usually be the downfall of most manga series, as the author would usually lean towards one side. But Sakamoto Days doesn't do that. It's managed to strike a perfect balance between intense action, mystery and humor, which is a treat to read through. So if you have $1.99 a month, I'd advise you to download the Shonen Jump app, subscribe and get to reading. And obviously this channel isn't sponsored, so I just think it's a good idea. Sakamoto Days has managed to rekindle the fire from when I first started reading manga, and forced me to hunt for more series that can spark that flame. It's made me take a chance on manga I never thought I'd find interesting, and I'm happy about that.